97 dealership groups across America received a letter from the Federal Trade Commission recently. What is worth paying close attention to is not the warning itself. It is what the warning confirms has been happening openly for years. The price you advertise must be the actual price you charge. Motorcycle dealers have treated that principle as optional for so long that a federal agency had to send a formal letter explaining that it is not. The FTC message was direct. Only taxes and required government fees are excluded, not the advertised price plus a $799 freight and preparation fee nobody requested, not the advertised price plus a $499 paint and fabric protection package already applied before you arrived, not the advertised price plus a pre-delivery inspection charge whose only real function is pushing the final number higher before you sit down. The price you see must be the price you pay. Motorcycle dealers have treated that principle as optional for so long that a federal agency had to send a formal letter explaining that it is not. That should not require complex regulatory action to enforce. But in American power sports retail, it apparently requires constant federal attention just to restate the basic rule. The FTC letter names specific categories of illegal pricing practice. It is worth understanding each one before you walk into any showroom. Advertising a price that excludes required fees is illegal. Advertising a price built on rebates most buyers do not actually qualify for is illegal. Conditioning the advertised price on dealer financing is illegal. Requiring buyers to accept add-ons that are not reflected in the advertised price is illegal. Anyone who has shopped for a motorcycle in the last decade will recognize every item on that list, not as edge case abuse by a handful of bad operators, but as standard procedure at a significant portion of dealerships. But understanding what the FTC said is only the beginning. Understanding why it took this long is the real story. The FTC Act's prohibition on deceptive practices has applied to power sports dealers throughout the entire period when these abuses developed and became normalized. State consumer protection laws have prohibited false advertising in vehicle sales for decades across most jurisdictions. Real enforcement actions have happened, real judgments have been entered against dealers in multiple states, but those cases operated against a backdrop of industry behavior that continued largely unchanged. The probability of facing enforcement in any given year has been low enough that undisclosed fees remain the more profitable calculation for most dealerships. Think about the math. A motorcycle dealership adding $1,500 to $3,000 in unannounced fees across hundreds of transactions every year generates substantial revenue. The expected cost of enforcement, spread across thousands of operators, stays well below that number. The math only shifts when enforcement becomes frequent enough and penalties large enough that deceptive pricing stops being worth it. Warning letters to 97 unnamed recipients do not change that equation in any meaningful way. What changes it is public enforcement actions with named dealerships, penalties scaled to the actual volume of deceptive transactions, and a regulatory presence consistent enough that no operator can assume it will not reach them. Until the risk of getting caught actually costs more than the revenue from not getting caught, the incentive structure stays exactly where it is. And the warning letter does not even address the layer of the problem that most buyers encounter first. Major power sports listing sites charge dealerships substantial monthly fees to display inventory. Millions of buyers treat those listings as real prices for comparison research. A significant portion of that listed inventory excludes required add-ons, omits dealer fees, or reflects financing structures that disappear the moment you bring your own lender. Dealers listing honest prices are at a commercial disadvantage. Their accurate numbers look higher than the strategic fictions posted by competitors on the same page. You see an honest price sitting next to a deceptive one, and the deceptive one wins the click. What is the incentive for a platform to police pricing when its revenue depends entirely on keeping dealers advertising? The answer has been consistent for years. Transparent pricing has not become the standard on the sites where most buyers start their research because enforcing it would cost those platforms money. None of them have chosen to absorb that cost voluntarily. The FTC letters going to dealers without equivalent pressure on the platforms that distribute the deceptive pricing leave the system structurally intact. Sending warnings to the source without addressing the distribution channel is like telling someone to stop counterfeiting while leaving every store that accepts the fake bills completely alone. And if the listing sites are not solving the problem, review scores are actively making it worse. Dealerships that embed undisclosed fees into every transaction can maintain 4- and 5-star ratings. Reviews measure the interpersonal experience, whether you felt respected, whether the bike was delivered clean, whether the salesperson returned your calls. Those things influence ratings far more than whether the price you eventually signed matched what you saw online. Many buyers who were overcharged through undisclosed add-ons do not register the discrepancy afterward. Some negotiated a few fees back and left feeling like they won. Others assume the additional charges were standard practice everywhere because at many dealerships they essentially are. That experience does not generate a review warning the next buyer about pricing honesty. That is why a dealership can carry a near-perfect rating while operating with practices the FTC would classify as straightforwardly deceptive. The ratings infrastructure was built to measure customer service, and it does that reasonably well. It was never built to measure pricing honesty, and it shows. But the pricing problem at the front of the dealership does not end when you stop buying and start maintaining. The right to repair situation runs directly parallel to all of this, and it does not get connected to the pricing conversation often enough. Manufacturer restrictions on diagnostic software and proprietary vehicle data are increasingly funneling service revenue toward dealership service departments. Independent shops are being squeezed out of repairs they used to handle without issue. When your only realistic option for repair is the dealership that sold you the bike, the asymmetry that worked against you at the sales desk is waiting for you again at the service counter. A labor rate with no competitive pressure, a parts markup with no alternative supplier, a diagnostic fee for software access that no independent mechanic is allowed to have. The Federal Trade Commission focusing on advertised sales pricing is a legitimate starting point. But the consumer protection problem in powersports retail extends well beyond the initial purchase transaction. The same structural dynamics that enable deceptive pricing on the front end enable it on the back end, and the rider has no leverage at either counter. Here's the test that proves all of this in 10 minutes from your own couch. Pull up any major powersports listing site. Find a motorcycle at a dealership you have not visited, note the listed price, then email the dealership and request a complete out-the-door quote with every fee, add-on, and required item clearly itemized. At a significant percentage of dealerships, the gap between those two numbers will confirm exactly what the FTC letter describes. It will do so consistently enough to show the behavior is a systemic pattern, not an isolated exception. This is the test worth running before you ever step on a lot, because the results tell you more about how a dealership operates than any star rating on any platform currently will. Dealerships willing to provide every fee and add-on in writing while you are still at home are telling you something important about how they intend to handle the transaction. Dealerships that insist full pricing requires discussing your financing situation first, or that the real numbers only come together in person are telling you something important too. That information deserves serious weight before you make the drive. The tools to protect yourself exist right now. The system was never designed to make them easy to find. Comprehensive enforcement across tens of thousands of dealerships requires resources that state and federal agencies have not allocated. Sustained regulatory pressure that actually shifts behavior broadly is measured in years, not months. What protects you today is making deceptive pricing visible before you set foot in a showroom, rather than after you are reviewing a contract. The listed price on a marketplace site should function as a starting research point and nothing more. Treating it as a real offer is how buyers end up sitting across a desk from a finance manager, reviewing a contract that looks nothing like the number that brought them through the door. Dealers willing to operate honestly have always existed alongside the ones who will not. What the industry has never produced without external pressure is a market where transparent pricing is the default and not the exception you have to specifically hunt for. The 97 letters make clear the federal government considers that default long overdue. What happens in the months ahead will tell you whether the other dealerships across this country have any real reason to change their approach, and whether the riders on the other side of this broken system finally have something with real teeth working in their favor. Request your out-the-door quote in writing before you ever walk through the door, and never let them tell you that the final number only comes together in person. If this opened your eyes, subscribe, leave a like, and tell me in the comments, what is the worst hidden fee a dealership ever tried to charge you?